Good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar today on pesticide record keeping. For those that don't know me, my name is Chris Demers. I'm the Extension Program Coordinator at University of Florida School of Forest, Fisheries, and Geomatic Sciences. I run our Florida Land Steward Extension Program. I'll be presenting today with Ms. Ginger Morgan with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, Brent Baltmeyer with the University of Florida IFAS Pesticide Information Office, and John Herbert, who is the chair of the North Central Florida Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area, otherwise known as a SISMA. This is a partner webinar. The purpose of the webinar is to provide some basic record keeping guidance recommendation, primarily for tree farmers who are trying to meet the minimum standards of the American Tree Farm System standards that now include some requirement to keep records when using pesticides, and pesticides of course include herbicides. And this is also for North Central Florida SISMA members, other SISMA members, and anybody who's interested, who's involved in land management or using herbicides and pesticides. I want to encourage everybody to please use the question and answer function that you see on your screen. Press that little Q&A button and we'll be monitoring that for questions. We're going to answer questions at the end of all the presentations. If you want to use the chat for the purpose of chatting, you can do that, but we're not going to necessarily monitor the chat for questions. So please use the Q&A for questions. On continuing forestry education credits, as well as FDAC's pesticide applicator CEUs, we have one Category 1 SAF approved and a half a credit for General Standards Core for pesticide applicator CEUs. Attendance will be recorded according to the Zoom webinar function. So if you're logged on and attending the webinar, that's recorded. And when you registered, you should have provided either your forestry SAF number or your state license number. And for the CEUs, please provide your pesticide license numbers. So you should have done that upon registration. If you didn't, don't worry, just email me those numbers and we'll get you the credits as needed. I also want to encourage everybody to complete the short evaluation that will pop up at the end of the webinar. It'll pop up automatically in your browser. It'll go to a brief Qualtrics evaluation. Please complete that and give us feedback so we can measure our results and gain impacts, which is important for our reporting quarterly. So we appreciate your feedback and participation in that. Also, the presentation slides and all the materials that we'll be talking about today are available on our Florida Land Steward materials page. I'm going to show you exactly where that is. When you go to our homepage, you'll see a sentence there that says find recordings, links, and materials for Land Steward events and webinars. And then everything is in that category of 2021 vegetation management and tree farm webinars. When you get to our homepage, this is what the middle of the page looks like. This third paragraph down, that's your link that'll get you to that page. And then click on the 2021 vegetation management and tree farm webinars, and that'll get you to all these materials. So we encourage you to access the materials that way. Also, the link to the materials page is also in the reminder emails that you received yesterday and today about this webinar. So let me know if you have any questions about how to access those. I'm happy to help. All right now I'm going to turn it over to John Herbert, the chair of the North Central Florida Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area, also with SISMA for short. John, thanks for participating.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, actually, I co-chair the North Central Florida SISMA with Ginger. And I suspect that some of you guys are not familiar with SISMAs and be wondering just what the heck is a SISMA. So a SISMA is an alliance of stakeholders that are addressing invasive species regionally within Florida. And you can see on the map here the areas where the different SISMAs within the state reside. What SISMAs do is they expand efforts across the landscape of people trying to manage invasives, and we try to overcome political boundaries. It doesn't do any good for property boundaries. It doesn't do any good for you to be trying to manage invasives on one side of a fence and your neighbor's not. So we try to form partnerships of federal, state, and local and government agencies, tribes in some cases, private landowners, other interested organizations of groups that are trying to manage invasives. So not only do we try to manage existing infestations, but we also try to monitor what's going on across the landscape, detect species that may be moving into an area early so that we can get an early eradication effort going, and just try to stay ahead of this as much as we can. And typically, a lot of times we think about invasives as being plants, but we're also dealing with insects. We're also dealing with vertebrates that are invasive species. I mean, we're all aware of the pythons in South Florida and the Tego lizards and such, but there are insect species that we're also trying to keep an eye on and manage those as best we can. So as you can see from the map, there are 15 SISMAs in the state. Some are known as working groups. They kind of adopt their own names. The North Central Florida SISMA is the largest in the state as far as the number of counties. We have 13 counties in the North Central Florida SISMA. One thing I want to make real clear is if you're not in the North Central Florida SISMA, it doesn't matter. I would encourage anybody on this call to become familiar with the SISMA in your area, the area where you're managing land, and get involved, because those people can help you identify invasives, can help you, can inform you what the invasives are in your area that are most of a concern, and any special efforts that are going on in your particular local area to monitor and control those invasives. If you need any help, you can go to the websites that are listed on the screen here, or you can call either Ginger or me, and we'll help you if we can, or we'll put you in touch with the people that are running the SISMA in your particular area. So a plug for the North Central Florida SISMA, and I'm confident that all the SISMAs do something similar. We have a meeting the third Wednesday of each month at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and sometimes we cover administrative stuff, sometimes we cover technical stuff that would be of practical use to landowners. So again, get in touch with your local SISMA and try to get plugged in so that you can help be more aware of and do a better job of controlling invasives on your land. In the North Central Florida SISMA, we try to have work days, in-person meetings, in-person training events. This last year, all that came to a halt because of COVID. But once COVID restrictions are relaxed a little bit, we hope to go back to having in-person meetings, in-person educational events, learning events in the field. This is the second time that the North Central Florida SISMA has teamed with Chris Demers and his landscape stewardship program to put on an educational event. We're thrilled to be able to do this. Again, this gets back to the SISMA mission, working with other like-minded organizations that have a similar mission. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
All right, thank you, John. I'm going to put on my tree farm hat now. This is a program that Ginger and I are involved with at the state level. There's several landowners and that are participating on the call today that are also involved in this program, certified in this program, as well as several foresters, county foresters, consultants that are involved with the American Tree Farm System and the Florida Tree Farm Program. So for those that aren't familiar with this program, it is a forest certification program, and forest certification is really a mechanism for monitoring forest management, tracing, labeling forest products, and verifying that forest management is sound, sustainable, and that's verified against a set of agreed on standards. And those set of agreed on standards with the American Tree Farm System are the American Tree Farm Standards of Sustainability. All of the forest products that come off of or that are harvested from certified tree farms are a part of a chain of custody, and that chain of custody is managed by the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. From the harvest to the mills and out the back door in retail, those forest products that are part of this chain of custody come with this label. So when you buy a box of tissue paper or see a magazine or paper products, solid wood products that have this label on it, the little leaf with a tree in it, also this PEFC, which is an international program for the endorsement of forest certification programs. You know that those products come from certified sources. Many of those certified sources are certified tree farms, forests that are managed by private landowners in Florida, across the Southeast, across the country. So the American Tree Farm System has the standards. They have a national network of landowners, foresters, others involved in forest management and serving private landowners. Each state has its own tree farm program that's an affiliate of the American Tree Farm System. In Florida, that program is the Florida Tree Farm Program, which is now a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We are the state affiliate of the American Tree Farm System. We have our own website. That site's linked on our materials page, as well as the slides that are in this introduction. If you're interested in getting involved with the American Tree Farm System and the Florida Tree Farm Program, get connected to those. Everybody that's certified in the tree farm system in Florida is automatically connected to our Florida Land Steward Extension Program. So you get the Land Steward newsletter, email updates if we've got your email address. It's a great way to get connected to programs and assistance that's available to you. So let us know if you have any questions. And this is a good segue to Ginger's presentation. She's going to be talking about the new tree farm standards. And Ginger, let's see, I think, yes, you have sharing capabilities, so you may share your screen when you're ready.
I'm getting there. Are you able to see my screen? Let me get in the presentation mode. It's not going. There it goes. So let us get here. So my name's Ginger Morgan. I was recently married, so my last name has changed to Beagle, and I know it's going to be quite a while for people to get used to that. So I try to include it in everything that I'm doing. And if you do email me at theginger.morgan, it will come to my Ginger Fiegel address. But as Chris and John mentioned, I'm active with both the North Central Florida SISMA and with the State Tree Farm Program. Basically, my job as being regional coordinator for North Central Florida is connecting partners and connecting landowners and helping landowners get their management done on their properties for wildlife habitat, whether it's through timber harvesting or any kind of other economical working land type needs, cattle, agriculture, helping them out with some guidance. And so we have a program within FWC called the Landowner Assistance Program. So we're working with these private landowners and developing management plans. We're assisting local conservation efforts such as the North Florida Prescribed Burn Association and these local SISMAs. And we're also recognizing landowners for the great job that they're doing, partnering with the Florida Land Steward Program, doing field tours, classroom exercises. It's all about partnership, working together and getting landowners the resources they need to be successful.
Hey, Ginger, I'm going to interrupt you for just a
Go ahead.
second. So we're looking at your at the black page where you're operating the slides from. I'm not seeing your full presentation screen.
Let me figure out what to do. Where do I need to go, Chris?
Well, let's see. So
Go to
if you-
your share screen. You may just need to share that full screen.
Share. Screen 2.
there it is.
All right.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Chris. But like I said, we also work at recognizing landowners for the great job they're doing. But a lot of times people want to know, what is the difference between recognition and certification? Chris just introduced us to the Florida Trees Farm System, and that is a certification program. We do have trained Florida Tree Farm inspectors that go out, visit with landowners, and look at a set of standards that the American Tree Farm System has put in place. And every 5 years or so, the standards are looked at and sometimes updated, which is what happened in 2021. On March 15th, we did get some new standards. So people, landowners, everybody, we love recognition. We love signs. That Diamond Tree Farm sign is something that we love seeing along the highways and promoting our program. But you might not understand what that tree farm is. We've got the wood, the water, the recreation, and the wildlife that's being represented in that. And with that, those inspectors are going out and looking at each of those categories in each of our 8 standards. The idea is that within Tree Farm, you're practicing sustainable forestry with the management plan. You're complying with all laws. You're putting reforestation, afforestation out there in a responsible way. Air, water, soil protection, your fish and your wildlife, aesthetics, and you're protecting cultural resources, as well as doing sustainable ways of producing your harvest. The standards that were changed or updated this 2021, some of them just provide a definition as far as continuity of land and where it's shaped on the geographically. Some of it worked on, what is a certain definition, you're clearing up some of that. But the biggest thing that changed as far as landowners concerned right now is standard number 4, the air, water, and soil protection. And basically what that one's looking at, it says that forest management practices maintain or enhance the ecosystems and ecosystem services provided by the forest, including air, water, soil, and site quality. And under this, there's actually 2 different performance measures. The first one's going to look at best management practices. But the one that's been updated is under performance measure number 4.2, is that a landowner shall consider a range of forest management activities to control pests, pathogens, and unwanted vegetation. So one thing that they do want to express in this is the definition of shall and should. Anything that says shall is basically meaning a must. So a landowner must consider a range of activities. Underneath that subset, they provide indicators. Basically, you're looking at and evaluating alternatives to control these pests. And then the 4.2.2 is that you will use pesticides if that's decided that that's the most opportune way. That you will use pesticides that are appropriate, they're stored, they're disposed of in according ways with the EPA. And then, of course, any person that's using it is appropriately trained, licensed, and supervised. So basically all that's saying is, hey, think about other ways that you can go about controlling the pests on your property, which is what that first picture on the top right is showing. It's a group of University of Florida Extension offices. We had Florida Fish and Wildlife, SISMA's out there, and the landowner looking at this large, extensive use of bamboo and air potato and all kinds of exotics that were growing in there. And we just kind of talked about it. And we talked about prescribed fire. We talked about, there's some bio control agents, the beetles that go out and eat the air potato. Excuse me, just looking at the realm of opportunities that are out there besides just going straight to the chemical. And if chemical is used, it needs to be responsibly and documented. So on the bottom left right picture, there's a picture of a fence line being treated for, looks like Kogan grass. The opportunity there would be, hey, if you're spraying, when the inspector comes out, just show what you sprayed, how you sprayed it, and have a follow through of documentation. So to sum that up, basically, previously between 2015 and 2020, there was no requirement for documenting pesticides, whereas now 2021, in that 4.2.2, there is documentation required. So what kind of records? It's all going to be all going to depend on the size, scale, and scope of your operation. So obviously, if there's an aerial spraying going out there, there's going to be much more documentation required, such as your pilot, your company, how much acreage. Whereas if you're just going out there with a backpack sprayer, it's not going to be as much. It might just be the chemical, the concentration that you used, and the date. Sometimes the weather conditions are important, so that you know if you're being effective. But all that is going to be something that you've written down that Dr. Bultmeyer is going to share with us, simple ways to do that. It's not meant to be prescriptive. It's not meant to be a huge burden on the landowner. It's just that you have to have some type of documentation of the pesticides that you've used. So when you're coming in and having that inspection from an inspector, as far as the tree farm program certifications are concerned, the inspector is going to come in and just ask, hey, is the landowner considering a range of activities to control their pests? And if they are, is it documented? Simple questions. And this is actually what their form looks like. It's simply the yes and no's with a small little part on the left for notes. So the landowner should be evaluating alternatives and that the pesticides are approved, applied, and they're being documented. Yes and no's. So there is no surprise. So why would you do this if you're not part of the tree farm program? What are the benefits of documenting your pesticides? Just like how that Southeastern American kestrel sits at the top of a tree and kind of looks around, by you providing documentation, you as the landowner are kind of taking control of what it is that's happening on your property and being able to look back on that, do a lot of observation and being able to tell what maybe the effects are. You can look at the success and the improvements of the treatment on your property. Maybe you need to change something. Maybe something didn't work. You can take it to the University of Florida IFAS and maybe get some further recommendations of what might happen for improvement. Also, if things did work, you might want to do it again. Same time, same channel next year. Make sure that you get on that property and do that same type of pesticide treatment. And then also you can share with others, share with your neighbors, share with organizations. And not everything's known about specific treatments. You want to stay within the label, of course. That's a binding legal document right there. You have to stay within that label. But if you mix something together and something worked, let other people know about it. You're documenting conditions. One important factor of that is if you are spraying or using some type of chemical and somebody else might think that you have an effect on an adjoining property or in some type of water, you can show, hey, no, I followed label directions. The wind was blowing this direction on that day. That couldn't have been any kind of effect that I have. Or, hey, I use a selective herbicide for grasses. My herbicide that I used would not have affected those hardwoods. So you're documenting the conditions of what you've performed during your pesticide activity. It helps with assessing costs. Finding out how much chemical used per acre could be beneficial so that later, when you're making your future decisions, you'll be able to be most efficient and effective. So just like I was talking about how that kestrel above is looking around, seeing what's going on, you want to keep your eyes open, document what's going on with your property. And just as if you had a timber harvester going out and you're spending money and contract to get your property harvested, wanting to know the income that you're making from that. Spraying for pesticides is the business land management parameter that you're looking at. So you wouldn't rehire a timber company that was not doing as efficient of work. So you wouldn't want to do the same as with the pesticide. You want to make sure that you're doing positive actions on your land. So the whole idea is just having that good stewardship, being able to properly apply pesticides on your land, documenting for those certification programs such as Tree Farm that you are following the labels and that you are using it in the best manner that you can to get the desired goals achieved in your management plan. So having partners such as Florida Land Steward Partnership, working with Tree Farm, I do want to mention part of the standard 4 is about best management practices, specifically like water quality, best management practices for silviculture. But our state does have imperiled species best management practices. We call them wildlife best management practices for forestry and for agriculture. And whether you're part of the programs or you're part of official enrollment and certifications, doing the best that you can for the properties to be able to achieve your goals is always in favor for everyone, being a good steward of the land. So with that, I'll turn it over. This is my contact information. Like I said, if you do still contact Ginger.Morgan, that will come to me, my inbox as well. But Ginger Fiegel's what I'm going by now. And I wish y'all good luck. Feel free to ask any questions when through the email or if we have opportunity at the end.
All right. Thank you, Ginger. I'm going to share or stop sharing your screen now and give screen sharing to Brett. Go ahead, Brett.
All right, did it come up?
Yep, you're all set.
All right, if the audio is coming through, we'll rock and roll. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is actually a new group for me to speak to. You mentioned the SISMAs earlier. I've done some training for SISMAs. I've touched FWC on the aquatic side. So to get to speak to a new audience is always an adventure. So before I get into the specifics of pesticide record keeping, I kind of need to establish what our office is. Some of you may not know what we do, and then who I am. Why am I the one talking about pesticide record keeping? So what is the mission of the PIO? Well, before I joined in November of 2019, so it was an exciting first year on the job, shall we say, with 2020 taking up most of that first year. But our goal is to provide both training and testing for pesticide license, certification, and recertification. Our goal is to ensure that the materials we develop are relevant, timely, concise when communicating pesticide policy to a broad audience. That's a whole lot of words that I inherited when what we basically do is the testing and training of pesticide applicators in the state of Florida. So our office helps to write the training manuals. We ensure that the testing is done in a fair way. We write many of the tests and then help to make sure that the county extension agents across all of Florida have the tools they need to provide continuing education and all that goes with that. So I like to say that I kind of hope we can change our name in the future. I know that the forestry school just changed their name. Maybe we can get a change for our office to go from the Pesticide Information Office to the Office of Pesticide Safety, because that's really what we do. It's making sure that in the state of Florida, it's professionals that are handling pesticides and they know what they do and how to do it. So how do I fit into this? I mentioned that I showed up in November of 2019. So what is my background? So my background is almost 20 years working with, in and around pesticides. I got started in the Midwest working for an aquatic application company. No, not doing the old school applications like we used to see, but targeting invasive species. So something like invasive species is very close to my heart. That's where I got started on my professional journey in undergrad, spent 4 or 5 summers working for a company in the Midwest. And while there, it became pretty clear that their training wasn't great, that what they were doing maybe wasn't the best way to do things. So I decided I needed to do some more learning. I needed to learn more about these invasive species and more about pesticides. So as a young man, I decided to come down to the greatest institution that exists in the entire world, the University of Florida, to do my master's and PhD at the Center for Aquatic and Invasive Species. While there, my master's was focused on finding treatment techniques for a native plant that was actually behaving more like an invasive that came from the aquatic industry, or the aquarium trade. And then my PhD was a little bit more focused on how do herbicides interact with the water and then ultimately interact with the plants that we're trying to control. So kind of shifting from being in the field, holding the wand, to learning at the university, a higher level of how these plants interact and then how pesticides work. Well, after my major advisor joked that I was on the 12-year plan, I showed him what was what and finished in, a whopping 6 years. And graduated, and it was time to move out into the real world. And at that time, the place to go was private industry. So off on my journey, I went to work for a company that did invasive species management across the United States in mostly aquatic settings, but then also mosquito control. So an international mosquito control product company and service company with the aquatics. So I started pretty early on in the field, hands-on training with some of the folks, and then that quickly morphed into working with sales and sort of a sales operations liaison. And then as time in that company wore on, it became much more looking at pesticide safety. What are the things that we can do that will make our treatments more efficient and safer? And then how do we train that overall? So as I started to move through this journey, I went from in the field almost every day, learning about it in graduate school where they had us in the field a lot, to still in the field, but now working to help train other folks in the field, which finally presented the opportunity to come back home where I always wanted to be, back here to the University of Florida. So that whirlwind tour is where my background got started and how I got here, and maybe gives you a little background on why I'm so passionate about this and why I try to be so energetic about pesticide safety, because I've been on the other side, having to sit in CEUs, trying to collect those CEUs, and I recognize how hard it is for many of you to want to get passionate about all of this, so I try to bring that enthusiasm. But today we're going to be talking about pesticide record keeping. And if I'm going to do the 6 W's, we got to answer all the questions. So we're going to go over who needs to do pesticide record keeping, what is it that you're capturing, when do you need to do that, where do you keep those records, why does any of this even matter, and then how do you do it? Now, how is the 6W that doesn't really fit? Because the W is all the way at the end. So how doesn't get its own bullet point. It will be interspersed throughout going over the rest of these. So as we cover the who, what, when, where, why, we'll understand the how. So first, let's start with who needs to do it. Who is absolutely required to keep pesticide records? Well, we just heard that is a new piece of that for the tree farm program is the tree farm program. If you are going to get your certificate, you need to have some sort of pesticide record keeping. Now, it's not just this program that says you need to keep records. The worker protection standard can come into play for many of you that you are making an agricultural product. You might tip into that WPS requirement, which has a whole set of pesticide record keeping, and we are not going to dig very deep into that. That is a murky land that would take much longer than the time that we have. Anybody that uses a restricted use product must keep records. How do you know if a product is restricted use? It will tell you right on the front of that label at the very top part. There will be a big box that says restricted use pesticide. If you have ever used that in any of your operations, you have to keep records of that use. And then finally, in Florida, we have something called the organo-auxin rule. And for the sort of tree world, this is going to be 2,4-D and triclopyr. There are some others that are on the list, but 2,4-D and triclopyr are the two that are going to trigger not just pesticide record keeping, but it is actually the most stringent of the pesticide record keeping. And we will get into these in a moment. Now, hopefully I haven't scared you too much. You don't have to keep 4 sets of records. You don't have to think this is going to be an avalanche of new things I've got to do. You know, this isn't as complicated as it sounds. So let's really start getting into what this looks like and the resources that are available for you. And hopefully at the end, you'll go, okay, I'm not about to be buried in a mountain of paperwork. This will actually be okay. So what is it that you're capturing when you do pesticide record keeping? And do you need to create your own form? You could. You absolutely can create your own form. It can be paper, digital, in almost any format that you want. But the good news is the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services has a fantastic template. If you were to follow this link to the webpage, it's a 2-sided form that gives you all the information that you would need for logging your pesticide usage. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can download that form, photocopy it, have it as a digital file, do whatever you want, and just use it over and over and over again. Or if you're not sure how to organize a template, this could serve as a really good background for you to build your own that fits your needs. So on the back page of that, it actually gives you really good information about who needs to do it, a little bit about WPS, and some information about, particularly for WPS, what you have to do for additional resources as well. So it's great for giving you background information, but the star of the show is certainly the record keeping itself. So what sorts of things is it suggesting that you should gather? Any place that you see an R in parentheses is something that is a requirement if you are using an RUP pesticide. So again, that restricted use pesticide. And as Chris mentioned earlier, a pesticide is an insecticide, herbicide, fungicide. Any kind of side that you are using is under that large umbrella of pesticide. So if you're using an RUP, you need the licensed applicator and their license number. Now, as we get further onto the form, there's going to be some places where it says you don't need a license. This is the individual for RUP purposes that is over direct supervision. So you in the state of Florida can apply restricted use pesticides without a license, but you must have a licensed applicator that is in direct supervision of those applications. Now, direct supervision doesn't mean that they are standing right beside you, but they need to be immediately available for questions, for guiding your treatment, and must be able to get to the site in a timely fashion should something occur. So no, they don't have to be locked hip to hip, but they should be readily available. Now, for some, particularly in, say, agriculture, if it's a chemical spray company or an aerial applicator, they may need to get information about the property owner who is authorizing that application, okay? So the very first part is kind of who is overseeing this and who has said we can do this treatment. Then any place that you see on the form where there's a W means that's a WPS requirement. And any place you see an R and a W, you need to get it for RUP and WPS. And I'm going to say that most of this information is pretty handy for any application that you're going to do. So when did you do the treatment? The date, the start time, and the end time. Who was the actual applicator? Now, it can be the same person that was up here, that's fine. But if it was somebody different or a crew of people, you need to capture that. You need to describe where that site was. This can sometimes be an address. For instance, when we would do mosquito treatments, if we were treating a single house, the address is the location. But for those of you that may be working on hundreds of acres, the address gets you part of the way, but then you need to describe where you actually did the treatment. It was in the southwest corner of plot 4, or it was the back 10 southwest acres of the property. Whatever description would allow an inspector to go where you treated readily, that they could kind of find that. And then what are you treating for? What are you trying to control, and in what system? So, I'm looking to control grasses underneath my pine tree. I'm looking to control hardwoods underneath my pine forest. Whatever your intended target is and where you're treating. The size of your treatment, I would highly recommend you put this in acres and be consistent in how you capture that across your entire record keeping. Be very consistent. Information about what you used, that's going to be brand name, registration number, and active ingredient. And we're going to look at a label here in a second that will show you where all this is. And don't worry, I'm going to show you what a filled out form might look like once we get through. The total amount of a pesticide that you applied. So how much did you put out? How did you put it out? With a backpack sprayer, with a piece of equipment? How did you get it out? And then if you fall under that WPS requirement, what was your restricted entry interval? So let's take a look at some labels, since there's information you've got to pull off pesticide labels. Where do we find that? Here's an example of a label. The brand name for this is Arsenal. So that's what you would put in for brand name. We come down here to active ingredient. Imazapyr is your active ingredient. For some of your active ingredients, you may want to include, hey, this is the isopropyl amine salt of imazapyr. If you're using something like 2,4-D, you may want to put it was the 2,4-D acid, or was it the ester, the amine. Be as specific as you think you're going to need for your own records. I would certainly want to know which 2,4-D I was using to make sure in the future I'm using something that was more effective. After you get your brand name and your active ingredients, towards the bottom of that first page, you will always have your EPA registration number. If you have a pesticide that does not have an EPA registration number, you either don't have a pesticide or you have an illegal pesticide. So you should always look for that registration number. It's also not a bad idea to get the establishment number and lot number should you have any performance issues with that herbicide. That's a way you can quickly reference back to your pesticide provider or the company themselves to find out if maybe something went wrong. Now, this label does not have an establishment number because it's a specimen, but if we look at a product here, we can see the EPA's registration number and establishment number are always right together. And those will additionally be stamped on the jug itself. So if the label flies away, as sometimes labels are like to do, you can find that information on the jug itself. So all labels are going to follow a similar theme. Your brand name is going to be up near the top. This is Bifin XTS. Your active ingredient is going to be listed under the active ingredient. And then you're going to have your EPA registration and establishment numbers. So let's take a look at an example of what a pesticide record keeping form can look like when filled out. So Alligator is who was supervising this application. There's their license number, and it was on Steve Irwin's property. We did that treatment, it was on the 20th of April from 3:30 to 4:30. Alberta Gator was who actually did that treatment. There is no license number here, so we know that the supervisor again is Alligator. It was at 123 The Swamp in the southwest corner of Lot 4, and this was for site prep. We were looking to get some hardwood control. We did 15 acres. We used Blammo, which is EPA establishment or registration number 8675309, and the active ingredient is Kills-Alzazine. We did 20 gallons. Now, the record keeping form doesn't say that you have to determine what rate you put out. I would always capture your rate. Was it a percent solution? Was it this many pounds of active ingredient per acre, this many gallons of active ingredient or gallons of product per acre? You want to capture what your rate was in that instance. If I just put 20 gallons here over 15 acres, I don't know if that was 20 gallons on a per acre rate or a percent solution. So I highly encourage you to capture that information. We used a backpack sprayer and there was no restricted entry. All right, so restricted entry might be something foreign to some of you. Let's take a look at a label that would fall under WPS. Garlon 3A, which is used in forest prep. You can see this big box on that first, sometimes it's on the second page, that says agricultural use requirements. Let's take a look at that a little bit closer. If you see this box, that means you have the potential to fall under WPS. If we had used this product for our treatment, our re-entry was 48 hours, and it will always list the PPE. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about WPS in just a second. So again, look for that agricultural use requirements box, and you're going to get some information up here. You'll always see your re-entry and then PPE. All right, now to add to the confusion, if you're using an organo-oxen, there are additional rules you must follow. Now, luckily, the organo-oxen rule is not like many of the Florida rules, a super dense rule that is hard to understand. It's, I believe, 2 pages. So it is very short, relatively easy to understand for legalese, and a very useful resource. So if you are using 2,4-D, triclopyr, or any of the organo-oxens on that list, take a look at that, familiarize yourself, and understand the requirements that that has. The biggest one is if you are using organo-oxens, you cannot spray if the wind speed is above 10 miles per hour. And you have to measure that wind speed. You can't just say, well, weather.com said that it was only 9 miles an hour, I was safe to spray. You must measure in the field at the time of treatment. And that's really, really important. 10 miles an hour may not seem like much, but with some of these organo-oxens, there are species that are very sensitive to that, and a little bit of drift can do an awful lot of damage. So something to be aware of. When do you fall under that organo-oxen rule? If you are treating 5 or more acres in a 24-hour period. So if your treatment area is larger than 5 acres, you're now under this rule and must follow all of the rules within that. You have to keep your records of all organo-oxen usage for 2 years. And just like the record keeping that we looked at earlier, there is a template that FDAX provides that's pretty helpful. And what you're going to see is there's an awful lot of overlap here. When did you do the treatment? Who was the licensed applicator that was overseeing this? Who was the actual person that made that application? Who was the property owner that allowed you to do that treatment? Where was the treatment? This is the additional thing. Where did you do your mixing and loading? So this might be the mixing and loading was at the mix load location at the central portion of the lot. It could be we mixed and load on site. Wherever you're putting your pesticides into your tank, that's what you need to capture here. Again, similar to the other form, what are you treating and where are you treating? How much did you treat? Information about what you used. Here, they're asking for the rate. You know, what was the active ingredient per acre? How much went out per acre? They're asking detailed questions about nozzle type. So what at the end of your spray wand, your spray tip, whatever, what is that nozzle? What is your system doing? So how many gallons per minute will it spray? And then for aerial type of applications, the angle of that spray matters. So this is when they're doing aerial applications to make sure that they're not getting as much drift. This entire rule is in place to ensure that they are documenting where these treatments went so that they can determine if drift is what caused damage. And I had mentioned wind speed. You not only have to get wind speed once, not twice, but 3 different readings within 5 minutes on site, which means having some sort of a device that is going to capture wind speed for you. So again, if you are doing more than 5 acres and using those organoauxins, become familiar with this rule. And I would say that for the most part, this kind of becomes your record keeping sheet, maybe rather than the one that I showed you earlier. All right, so when do you need to do record keeping? Can I do it a month later? Do I need to do it the very second that the pesticide's coming out of the nozzle? You have 48 hours to document what your treatment was. Anytime after 48 hours, an inspector can come and demand those records, and if you can't produce them, then that would put you in violation. But really, if we're being honest, the best time to do it is when you're putting the treatment out. You're already probably looking at what is my plan for the day? What am I treating? How much is going into my tank? Jot it down as you go, then you're not having to remember, and it's just taken care of. If you are doing this as a commercial application, so you are being paid specifically to apply somewhere else, you need to give that customer a report within 30 days. Now, this customer report can capture all of that same information we talked about and can serve dual purpose. It can be the report that you send to your customer and what you keep for yourself. You must keep those records for 2 years. All right, worker protection standard. I have hit this several times. I am not going to go into all of what goes into WPS. To give you an idea how much of a training it is all on its own, here in May, I will be traveling around the state to each of the extension districts around Florida to work with our county extension agents to brief them on WPS. So we'll be spending 2 hours looking at a very crash course overview of what's involved in that. And the idea is then those agents can service you, the stakeholders. If you have questions, ask. Another really good resource is this pesticideresources.org. It gives you a wealth of information about WPS. It has a walkthrough where you may say, does WPS apply to me? And it will ask you questions, and it will tell you if WPS applies to you. It has training videos. It has information on what you may need to do in addition. Okay, I have to do central posting now. What does that look like? Almost everything you will need is on that website. And again, if you need additional help, reach out to your extension agents in your county. And if they can't help, they will reach out to our office and we will provide whatever is needed. I don't want to spend too much more time on WPS. That's a whole other thing. All right, where do you keep these records? Can I just scratch what I did on the ground in the dirt? Can I just write it on a chalkboard? Believe it or not, we had somebody that did record keeping, and this was a legitimate form of record keeping, where they used a Sharpie to write on their barn door. It was inside, it didn't disappear. Technically, that is adequate record keeping. So there really aren't rules, except that it needs to be readily available when an inspector shows up. So when they say we need to see your treatment records, it can't be that you have to file a special claim to get it from corporate and it'll show up in 3 months. It needs to be readily available, either digital paper, you can print it out. Again, I guess you could take somebody to the barn door and show them where you wrote it in permanent Sharpie, not advisable, but would still meet the requirements. You can keep your pesticide records separate from everything else if you think of like tax records, or you can incorporate it into your other business documents. We mentioned that customer report. It was a regular practice at the company I worked at before. All of the pesticide record keeping was logged in the phone when the techs were in the field. That generated a digital customer report that served for our purposes, their purposes. It was digital, it could be printed. It was a really good system. Nothing says that you have to have it digital. You can absolutely fill out that paperwork in the field, and that is adequate. But we all know that the problem with that is paper can get wet, it can burn, it can disappear, and you are still responsible for having those records for 2 years. With the digital records that we have now, the ability to store things in the cloud, in the ether, where you can get them from anywhere, an entire business could burn to the ground. Certainly pesticide records at that point are the least of your worries, but with the digital backup, you've always got it. All right, so why should you even bother endeavoring down this entire ordeal? And Ginger hit it on the head with much of what she said. I'm going to add a couple other benefits that you might see with why you would want to do record keeping. It's going to protect you from any potential fraudulent claims. There's no doubt that in the world we live in, pesticides are not seen favorably by many. That's not to say that there aren't legitimate claims. There absolutely are. But it can protect you from fraudulent claims. If I said you sprayed your field on April 20th and you killed all of my fancy orchids and you sprayed my dog and you were just trying to poison me, and you can pull your records for the last 4 years, let's say, and go, we didn't treat a month before your claim and we didn't treat 2 months after. Here's our records. That really serves as a sense of you don't have to try to remember, oh, did we spray that day? It's set, it's safe, you know. It's going to give you really good treatment history. And this is going to be important to determine what has worked really, really well. What maybe hasn't worked? What do I need to adjust to maybe get even better control? Do I have a particular technician that is always getting herbicide failures? It allows you to maybe figure out what kind of training can we do. This is really important for resistance management. You may find a pesticide that works fantastic on a particular invasive species you have. But if you use that same product over and over and over and over without using anything else, you run the risk of resistance. So now this fantastic tool that you had for invasive species management is broken, and you're probably not going to get it back. So this will let you look and go, okay, the last 2 treatments we've done on this site, we use this product. We probably need to switch our mode of action and try something a little bit different. And at the end of the day, most of you are spending a lot of time planning what are we going to grow, where are we going to grow, when, what are we going to treat, what do we have to look out for? You're putting in all of that hard work up front. Take that little bit of time to capture what you're doing, and you'll see all of those other benefits. You know, in addition, it can be a great way to check your inventory. If you're going, well, we said that we sprayed 40 gallons per acre, 40 gallons per acre. Yeah, we're missing a whole bunch of pesticide. Well, maybe that employee that was always getting failures was stealing some pesticide on the side. Or, hey, we just 2 years ago in this field had to do a big treatment. I bet we're coming up and we used 200 gallons of this product. Boy, we don't have that in inventory. Maybe that's what we should look at purchasing for this next year. This can be a good check to make sure that you're properly calibrated. When was the last time that you checked your equipment to make sure that it was putting out exactly what you thought it was putting out? Records are a great way to see, you know, every year we start with great control in the spring, but by the time we get to summer, we're not seeing such good control. Well, did you stop to recalibrate your equipment? These are the sorts of things that you can really dig into by keeping proper pesticide record keeping. And again, that transparency, it just means that you can defend what you are doing, why you are doing it, and how you are doing it to show that you're not just meeting the bare minimum, but with this level of transparency, you're showing that you are engaging in proper stewardship. And then again, it's a good way to go back and check the efficacy of treatments. You know, if you're doing a treatment that's going to take a long time to show results and you're 9 months out and you're going, what did we use 9 months ago? The only way you're going to for sure know is if you have proper pesticide records. All right, so to summarize and keep us on time, I would say that every single person that uses pesticides should keep some kind of pesticide records. It is a good idea for all of the reasons that Ginger went over, that I have gone over. It is just good stewardship to keep pesticide records. Those that are engaged in the tree farm program, according to the new rules, that use restricted use products or fall under WPS must keep records. You don't have a choice. It's not a should at that point, it's a must. FDACS has really good pre-made forms. Additionally, you can look online and find all kinds of templates for pesticide record keeping forms. You can make your own. The point is gather the information you need in whatever way will be the most useful to you. And I would say that the benefits of keeping pesticide records will far outweigh that hassle. And it's not to say it's not a hassle. It's not to undermine that, yes, you have to write these down, you've got to store them, you've got to find a place to keep them. But the minimal amount of hassle is far outweighed by the benefits that you get. This is my contact information, and I believe we have time for questions. And I certainly thank you for the opportunity to talk today.
All right, great. Thank you, Brett. Good job. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right, Brett is correct. We do have time for more questions. We've got a couple that have come in here. Let's see here. Bring these up. We've got a question here for Brett. What do you tell young people to persuade them to get into this field? I guess she's referring to your earlier slides about your history getting into it. We're having problems with the perception of exposure to chemicals and health issues.
So this is a problem, and I'm sure John, in working in a SISMA, gets this a lot too. This perception that chemicals and pesticides are just an inherently bad thing. And what we get to is the discussion should always be centered on what if we do nothing? So invasive species is a great example. If we don't manage invasive species at all, what are the things that can come from that? And if the decision is, well, we must do something to manage, then it's looking through all of the tools that are available. This is part of a good integrated pest management program. And yes, pesticides are a piece of that. And as far as the perception that they are always harmful, yes, they have that potential, as does much in life. It's a bit cliche, but I'm going to do it anyway. Every time we get in our car, we are taking on the risk of an accident, of something catastrophic happening. We do things to limit that. We're aware drivers. We don't talk on our phone. We wear seatbelts. Cars are designed better. It's the same thing with pesticides. There are things like PPE. There's reading and understanding your labels. There's going to trainings where people are giving you the information to use it in as safe a manner as can be done. And at the end of the day, even though I've worked with pesticides my whole life, I accept that there are instances in which people's discomfort with pesticides can be valid and shouldn't be dismissed. There are times where it isn't the right tool because people aren't comfortable with it. Being a part of IFAS, we will always follow the science. And if science says something can be used effectively and efficiently and in a manner that's safe, we'll stick with that. That's kind of a long-winded, rambling answer, but there is no easy one for that. And if I had the answer to that, phew.
All right, thank you. The next question, I think I can answer this one. Is this form, or are these forms electronic? And yes, they are electronic, and we've got those available on the screen that's showing now. That link will get you to the page where you can access all the forms that Brent had on his slides, as well as his presentation slides, and Ginger's presentation slides are there as well. So we encourage you to go to those. Go to that page and you can access all these materials. If you have any trouble, just drop us a line. We're happy to help you. All right, the next question. Do we need to keep records of using triclopyr in very minute amounts from just a few hardwood tree stumps to avoid stump sprouting? Is there a minimum amount of product that trips reporting requirements? I think with triclopyr, I believe it's that 5 acres that triggers the requirement, right, Brett?
Well, and so where this gets really, really tough is when you're doing tree stump, you're doing, higher concentrated treatment right in a very small area, but you may be wandering over 10 acres. And I believe FDAX is currently working to update their organo-auxin rule to address this very thing. But right now it exists in kind of a gray area. So my answer to that is always make sure that if you aren't keeping records, that it is defensible. We treated 3 trees that existed within 10 acres. There is no way that those 3 trees equals 5. The amounts that we were using were small. You start talking about we treated 1,000 little stumps over an area of 50 acres, it gets a little bit harder to figure out. So I'm always going to tell you, you should keep records of your pesticides. That's the best answer. But if you really, really don't want to, make sure that it is a defensible discussion.
All right, that's good advice. Got a question about tank wash. Can you speak a bit to the importance of equipment maintenance and best ways for managing tank wash?
Well, keeping your equipment in good working order and checking to make sure that it is still operating within your calibrated means. If you're supposed to put out a product at 10 gallons per acre and you don't know how fast your machine is pumping out, you could get to the end of your treatment and have a whole bunch left in your tank, or you could overtreat in areas. So keeping your equipment in good working order is really important. And then for managing your tank wash, so as you get it empty and then you're doing a rinse out of that tank, the rules for that are whatever product you were using, that tank wash in the rinse of your jug needs to be put out in an approved treatment site. So let's say I'm in a tree stand and the product I'm using says I can use it in the tree stand. When I go to do that wash at the end, I need to then apply in that site. So you'll triple rinse your jugs back into your equipment, spray that out. And I'm actually working on an EDIS publication right now that talks about cleaning out your spray tank. Never let products sit in your tank overnight. And I tell people that and their eyes get huge because they go, well, I fill it up and I just spray it till it's empty. Anytime you are leaving product in that tank, it's subject to breaking down. It's subject to binding into your tubes and becoming something that can come out and cause damage. Those organo-auxins will damage species at very low rates. And for me, that spray equipment is not cheap. Anytime you're leaving something in there that's an oil or that has surfactants, it can eat away at the rubber gaskets and all of that. And then you can be out spraying and blow a hose and go from being a good steward that is protected from pesticides to blasting yourself. So never let products sit in that tank overnight.
Very good advice. Thank you. This is a good question. Oh boy, if you got an answer to this, I would love to hear it. Brett, what are some alternatives to pesticide use for aquatic invasive plant management besides mechanical harvesters? And how does IFAS Extension share that information with the public? Thanks for the great presentation.
Let me pull up the Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants site and post that in the Q&A so that you have that, because that's going to be your best resource. Let me get this pulled up here. My internet decided to quit working. All right, let me copy that and paste that in, and hopefully everybody can see that. So that website is going to be a great resource. It's plants.ifas.ufl.edu. And they have tons of information about biocontrol, which we do use in invasive species management. There is a role for mechanical harvesting. There's a role for prevention. We try to lean into IPM as much as we can. Yes, oftentimes pesticides are the most economical and effective choice, but they aren't the only choice. And it's a discussion that Ginger will probably be highly aware that FWC is having to have constantly. They engage stakeholders to find out what they want. And the Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants, it's Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants, not Center for Pesticides. They are looking at all available resources to manage those invasive species. So there are alternatives, but I would say that it's like much of IPM, there is never just one alternative. You use the best tool for the job.
All right, great. I'm going to post that link also in the chat, Brett, just in case people aren't seeing it in the
Perfect.
in the Q&A. So that's there. If you all want to look in the chat, I just posted that link to the Center for Aquatic and Invasive Plants. That is a great resource for a lot of different plants, upland and aquatic. All right, let's see. Any other questions come in? I don't see any further questions at this point. I do want to encourage everybody to use that Q&A button. I did see a hand come up at some point in the presentation. Best way to ask that question is on the Q&A, so please do that.
Hey, Chris, this is John Herbert.
Hey, John.
I am, as a panel, unable to enter a question, see questions that have been asked, but I can't enter one. So I've got a question.
Okay.
And going back to what Ginger introduced about the new tree standard rule, and it's stating that the pesticides we use have to be approved by EPA and then applied, and I'm reading off of her presentation here, by persons appropriately trained, licensed, and supervised. So my question is, can a landowner who is not licensed apply pesticides to his or her land and still be certified by the tree farm program?
I'm going to attempt to answer that question, John, and I'll let Ginger chime in too. But I think the restriction regarding that is really going to come into play with those restricted use pesticides. That's where you're required to have a supervisor that's recorded on that form. And as Brett said, that supervisor doesn't need to be right there, but within easy contact and able to be there in case anything happens. Brent and Ginger, do you want to add anything to that?
Chris, I'll just add, I mean, the idea behind that standard is just that landowners are treating responsibly and have training, knowing what they're doing and following that label. It's not any type of, going to school and getting a certificate that you're permitted to apply those herbicides unless that's the type of herbicide that requires that.
And I'll add, for any restricted use pesticide, you can't even purchase that unless you have a license. So it's not like you can accidentally go to the store and pick up something that's restricted use. If they're a legitimate pesticide dealer, they will require a license for you to purchase that restricted use product.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that, because from the previous discussion, it was not clear to me that this was talking specifically about restricted use pesticides. So given that context, I understand it.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Thank you, John. I appreciate that. That helped us to clarify that for everybody. All right, I'm going to keep looking at the Q&A here. We'll monitor that for another few minutes. We're a little past 4:30 now, so if people need to sign off, we appreciate y'all participating. I'm going to keep it open for a little while. I'll go over some of these concluding slides while we're monitoring the Q&A box. I want to encourage everybody to please fill out that evaluation. That's the link, and that should pop up in your browser when you exit the webinar today. It'll also be linked in the follow-up email you'll get tomorrow. It'll be that the link to that will be in the email, so you'll have another opportunity to access that evaluation. So please help us out, provide us your feedback so we can report impacts and use that information. Also, I want to re-emphasize that all the materials that were discussed today are available on our Land Steward site. That link will get you to the home page, and when you get to the home page, you're going to click on that last link in that that third sentence here, finding, recording links, materials for webinars. That's your link right there. That'll get you to that page, and then look at the 2021 vegetation management and tree farm webinars. That's where this one is. All that information is available. I think we might have had a question come in here. Let me look. Okay, you're welcome, Greg. We had a thanks there. Yeah, I want to thank our presenters today. Thanks so much, Brent Bultmeyer. I learned a lot from your presentation today. This was very helpful for me, and I know it was helpful to others too. I also want to thank Ginger Morgan-Fiegel. Sorry I didn't get your name right earlier, but I get another chance here. Ginger Morgan-Fiegel with the Fish and Wildlife Commission Landowner Assistance Program Coordinator for this region. We appreciate all of her efforts. She's engaged with the Land Steward program and the Tree Farm program, does a great job, and does a lot of great work for the landowners in this region. And John Herbert, of course, we appreciate your leadership along with Ginger in the North Central Florida Cooperative Invasive Species Management area. The SISMAs are a great thing, great partnerships working across property lines to control invasives, because as they say, invasive species know no boundaries. So we got to work across our agency lines and work with each other to get on top of these issues. Also want to thank all of our Florida Land Steward partners, supporters that are involved in our outreach. We get financial support from the Florida Forest Service, the National Wildlife Federation, also from the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, the Florida Implementation Committee. We work closely with the Florida Tree Farm Program, the Fish and Wildlife Commission, the Invasive Species Partnership on a lot of things. These are all great partners that we work with each year. So we want to acknowledge the support and cooperation of all of our partners. All right, I think I haven't seen any more questions. Oh, here we go. Oh, that was from Grace. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Another compliment on the program. Excellent program. And thanks, Ginger and John. All right, great. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thanks, everybody, for your participation in your presentations. And until the next webinar adventure, we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.